46 minutes of mysteries historians STIL can't solve now.
Imagine a world where the history you thought you knew was not the history at all but a puzzle, a mystery wrapped in time itself, where trained historians argue, scholars lose sleep, and the truth slips like sand through your fingers. Welcome to 46 Minutes of Mysteries.
Actual historians debate, a journey that will shake your certainty in textbooks and make you realize how much of our past is still hidden, misunderstood, or deliberately kept in the shadows. And before we go any further, I encourage you, yes you right now watching, to stick with me till the end, because every mystery builds into the next like chapters of a forgotten book, and when we reach the final one you will look at history with brand new eyes. So don't just watch. Engage. Leave a comment telling me which mystery shocked you most. Share this with a friend who loves hidden truths, and of course, subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Because this is not just history, it is suspense, it is revelation, and it is the kind of story no classroom ever dared to tell you. And now we begin with a mystery so profound it still divides historians today. The lost city of Atlantis, the very symbol of ancient worlds swallowed by time. Did it exist, or was it only a parable told by Plato? For centuries the debate has raged, some scholars claiming it was an allegory, a lesson about hubris and divine punishment, while others argue with fiery passion that it was real, a thriving civilization that vanished beneath the waves. They point to ruins in the Mediterranean, to geological evidence of floods, to maps that curiously resemble descriptions given thousands of years ago. The argument heats up because every piece of evidence seems to bend under scrutiny. Skeptics laugh, believers insist, and both sides fight to claim the truth. But the mystery endures and pulls us deeper. Because if Atlantis was real, it changes the timeline of human civilization forever. And here's the strange part. Historians cannot agree. Not because they don't have information, but because the information itself seems to point in two directions at once. And so the question is left dangling, a ghost of history unresolved. And just when you think that's the biggest mystery of all, you stumble into another one, an even more dramatic debate. The pyramids of Egypt, yes, we all know them as one of the 7 wonders of the world. But do you know that historians still argue over how they were built, not whether they exist, but how in the name of human ingenuity a civilization over 4,000 years ago managed to raise blocks of stone weighing tons into perfect alignment with celestial stars? Some historians say it was brute force and genius engineering. Others whisper of lost technologies, forgotten machines, or knowledge we no longer possess. Mainstream archaeologists argue back with ropes, ramps, and workers. But even their reconstructions fail to fully convince, because no one has ever successfully rebuilt a pyramid with the tools we assume the ancients had. So the debate lives on, a burning question in classrooms, documentaries, and among professional historians who often hesitate to admit the depth of uncertainty. Yet the pyramids stand unmoved, silent and powerful, daring us to solve their riddle. And as we wrestle with those stones of the desert, we travel across oceans into the mist of the Pacific, where another great mystery stares from stone faces. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, a place where massive moai statues rise like guardians, their eyes once painted, their presence commanding. Historians debate not only how they were moved, but why they were made. What society invested so much in carving these monoliths? Some argue it was ancestor worship. Others believe it was tied to celestial cycles. Some claim it was a display of power and unity, while others insist it led to ecological collapse. The tragedy of a people over-consuming their island to move statues, but then recent evidence challenges this collapse theory, suggesting that the islanders were far more sustainable than earlier historians accused. So the debate grows fierce. Accusations of bias and colonial misunderstanding thrown across conferences, and the moai remain, watching silently as scholars bicker in their shadow. Yet the mystery is more alive than ever. For what do the statues truly mean, and why were they placed the way they were? Aligned with hidden patterns only beginning to be uncovered. And now we move from stones and islands to something even stranger. Ancient texts that historians cannot fully interpret, like the Voynich manuscript, an illuminated book filled with bizarre drawings of plants that don't exist, women bathing in strange pools, astronomical charts that match no known system, and written in a language no codebreaker, no AI, no historian has ever fully deciphered. It sits in Yale University, taunting experts. Every year new teams try to solve it, to crack the code, but each solution collapses under scrutiny. Some say it is a medieval hoax. Others insist it is a genuine lost language, a coded book of alchemy, medicine, or even an alien origin. The fact remains, historians still do not know what it is or why it was written, and every attempt to declare it solved sparks another debate. So once again, history refuses to give us peace, instead offering mysteries that multiply the more we search. And this is what makes history thrilling. It is alive, uncertain, and filled with questions, not answers. Which brings us to another enigma that splits historians down the middle. The Shroud of Turin, said to be the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, imprinted with a faint image of a crucified man. Is it authentic, or is it a medieval forgery? Tests have contradicted each other. Radiocarbon dating says one thing, pollen samples and textile studies say another. Some historians see it as sacred truth, others as clever deception. Yet the debate persists because evidence is not conclusive. Faith collides with science, and history sits trembling between them. Unresolved, powerful, divisive, and now you begin to see the pattern. Mystery after mystery, not solved but debated endlessly, and this video, this story, will take you through 28 of them, each stranger and more gripping than the last. So if you've been watching this long, don't stop, because we are just getting started, and the more we uncover, the deeper the rabbit hole goes. From lost empires to undeciphered scripts, from relics that shouldn't exist to events that historians cannot explain. This is not just knowledge, it is suspense, it is drama written by time itself. And in the next mystery, we confront the strange disappearance of the Roanoke colony, the very first English settlement in America that vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the word Croton carved into a post. Historians debate what happened. Were they killed? Did they assimilate into native tribes? Or did they starve and scatter? Each theory supported and challenged with equal passion. But no proof has ever been final. The mystery lingers as one of the earliest unsolved episodes in American history, and from there we leap into the Maya, a great civilization that built towering cities, measured time with uncanny accuracy, and then suddenly, mysteriously, their cities were abandoned, their population dispersed, and historians debate why. Was it drought, warfare, rebellion, or something else? Perhaps a combination, yet the truth remains elusive, their ruins echoing with unanswered questions. And as we push further, we must also confront the Antikythera mechanism. A device pulled from an ancient shipwreck off Greece, filled with gears and mechanisms so advanced it should not exist in its time, yet it does. Historians debate whether it was an isolated genius invention or evidence of a broader lost technology. Some argue it proves ancient Greeks were capable of analog computers, while others claim it was a one-time marvel with no real impact. But either way, the device defies expectations, reminding us that history may have been far more complex than we dare to admit. And as we trace these mysteries one after another, the story only grows more intense, because each debated enigma points to the same haunting truth, that the past is not fixed, not certain, but a battlefield of ideas where even experts cannot agree. And that is why you must keep watching, keep following, because the journey through these 28 mysteries is not just about learning. It is about questioning, doubting, and realizing that the greatest suspense story ever told is not in fiction, but in our own forgotten history. And with that, we move deeper still into mysteries historians debate behind closed doors, in conferences, in dusty archives, and in heated journals. Mysteries that refuse to die and make our understanding of humanity far stranger than we imagined. Now, as we move deeper into the catalog of mysteries that actual historians continue to debate, one of the most compelling enigmas is the tale of the Trojan War itself, and whether it happened as Homer described in the Iliad. For centuries, scholars treated it as pure myth, a story of gods, heroes, and fate. Yet archaeological evidence from the site of Hisarlik in modern Turkey suggests there was indeed a great city that burned around the same time Homer claimed Troy fell. Historians argue bitterly about what parts are legend and what parts may be truth. Was there a real Helen whose abduction sparked a war? Was there truly a Trojan horse, or was that detail an allegory for siege tactics? Did the war last 10 years, or is that poetic exaggeration? The debates never end because fragments of truth are buried under layers of myth, and yet historians cannot dismiss the possibility that some core of the Trojan War was real. And this is the razor's edge on which history balances, forever torn, between archaeology and legend. And just as the Trojan War teases us with mythic uncertainty, so too does the story of the Amazons, the warrior women of antiquity, described by Herodotus and other classical sources, long considered fantasy until archaeologists began uncovering graves of Scythian women buried with weapons, their bones showing evidence of horseback riding and battle wounds. Suddenly historians were forced to debate again. Could the Amazons have been inspired by these fierce nomadic women? Some historians insist the myth was exaggerated beyond recognition, others argue it was rooted in reality, and now conferences rage over what is real and what is imagined, showing once again that history is not fixed, it is alive, contested, and haunting. And speaking of haunting, one of the greatest enigmas of medieval Europe is the mystery of the Knights Templar, the warrior monks who rose to immense power only to be accused of heresy and crushed by kings who envied their wealth. What historians argue about is not whether they existed, but what happened to their fabled treasure. Was it hidden, spirited away to Scotland, buried beneath cathedrals, or did it never exist at all? And tied to this are whispers of secret rituals, strange relics, and coded messages carved into architecture. Professional historians debate fiercely whether these claims are real history or the inventions of later centuries. But the fact remains, the Templars leave behind shadows that fuel debate to this day, and this brings us to another powerful mystery. The fate of the Ark of the Covenant, said to hold the tablets of the Ten Commandments. Some historians argue it was lost when the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem. Others believe it was hidden, perhaps carried to Ethiopia, where certain churches claim to guard it even today. Yet no historian can provide proof, and every expedition that seeks it ends in controversy, with scholars arguing over whether the Ark ever existed at all, or if it was a symbol misunderstood by later generations. Still, its absence drives speculation and scholarly battle, for an artifact of such legendary importance cannot simply vanish without leaving behind questions that demand answers. And as we cross from the Middle East to the Far East, we confront another debated mystery: the origins of the Japanese people and their connection to the lost Jomon culture. Historians debate whether Japan's earliest settlers were isolated or connected to broader migrations across Asia, and the Jomon pottery, some of the oldest in the world, throws the timeline of civilization into question. Was Japan developing complex society independently, or was there a web of forgotten contact with other ancient cultures? The arguments are fierce because the answers shift not only Japanese history but world history, and yet the evidence remains incomplete, leaving historians in constant debate. And now from cultures we step into individuals whose lives blur myth and fact, such as King Arthur, the legendary British leader said to have defended his land against invaders. Historians fight endlessly about whether he was real or purely legendary. Some claim he was a composite of several warlords. Others insist he was a complete invention. And yet, archaeological finds of post-Roman Britain hint at turbulent battles, defensive fortresses, and leaders who could fit fragments of the Arthurian legend. The debates roar across journals and conferences, because to prove Arthur existed would reshape the understanding of early Britain. But until concrete evidence appears, historians are trapped between folklore and possibility. And speaking of folklore colliding with history, we cannot avoid the Viking voyages to the New World, for long before Columbus set sail, Norse sagas described Vinland, a fertile land across the Atlantic. Historians once dismissed it as fantasy until the discovery of Norse settlements at Lance aux Meadows in Newfoundland, proving Vikings did cross the ocean. Yet the debate remains. How far did they go? How long did they stay? And what contact did they have with indigenous peoples? Historians argue over the scale and significance of Viking exploration. Some downplay it as minor. Others insist it was a transformative encounter that history has minimized. But once again the truth is contested, and this is the heart of history's mysteries, the endless tug-of-war between proof and doubt, between evidence and silence. And now we leap to one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in all of Mesoamerican archaeology. The Olmec colossal heads, massive stone sculptures with distinct features that historians still debate. Were they representations of rulers, gods, or ball players? Why were they carved so large? And how were they transported? Some scholars suggest foreign influence. Others insist they are entirely local, but no consensus exists, leaving the Olmec heads as eternal enigmas staring at us from the jungle with their secret meanings unspoken. And from the jungles we sail back into the Mediterranean to confront another debated marvel, the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Historians argue over what it really looked like, whether it straddled the harbor, as some legends say, or stood beside it, whether it was truly as massive as later writers claimed, and what became of it when it collapsed. Some say it was melted down for scrap centuries later. Others argue fragments may still lie hidden. The debates rage because no definitive description survives, leaving historians with speculation and contradictory accounts, yet the image of the Colossus still towers over imagination. A mystery that history refuses to clarify, and then we encounter one of the strangest unsolved debates of the modern era. The identity of Jack the Ripper, the serial killer who stalked London in 1888, leaving behind fear and mutilated victims. Police reports survive. Letters signed, Jack the Ripper, were sent to authorities, yet historians cannot agree on who he truly was. Dozens of suspects have been proposed, from doctors to princes to local butchers. But no evidence has ever settled the case, and the debates spill not only in criminology, but in history itself. Because the Ripper has become part of London's story, a mystery historians argue about in detail but can never solve, leaving a dark cloud that endures over Victorian history. And speaking of unsolved identities, we must turn to Shakespeare. Yes, even the greatest playwright in English history is subject to heated historical debate over authorship. Some historians argue that William Shakespeare of Stratford-upon-Avon wrote all the plays attributed to him. Others insist it was a pen name for noblemen like Francis Bacon or Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford. The arguments often grow heated and academic, for at stake is the authorship of works that define English literature. Mainstream historians defend Shakespeare, but the challengers refuse to fade, ensuring that the debate continues to spark controversy centuries later, showing once more that even cultural giants are not free from historical mystery. And if you are still with me at this point, still watching and listening as we unfold layer after layer of mystery, then I ask again that you support this journey. Subscribe, like, share, and comment, because each mystery is not just entertainment, but a reminder that our understanding of the past is fragile, contested, and worth questioning. And as we push forward, we face the mystery of the great Zimbabwe ruins in Africa. Massive stone structures built with such skill and grandeur that early European historians could not believe Africans had constructed them. They wrongly attributed them to foreign builders. But modern archaeology proves otherwise, yet debates remain about exactly who built Great Zimbabwe, when, and for what purpose. Some argue it was a royal palace, others a religious center, others an economic hub in a vast trade network. The absence of written records keeps the debates alive, and historians must confront both the colonial biases of past scholarship and the enduring mystery of this extraordinary site. And now from Africa we leap back to Europe. And a mystery in plain sight. The Stonehenge Circle in England. Giant megaliths arranged in alignment with solstices. But for what reason? Historians still debate whether it was a temple, a burial site, an astronomical observatory, or a ritual space for things we cannot imagine. Every excavation uncovers new evidence, but the debates refuse to resolve. Because Stonehenge guards its secret purpose with silent stones, and historians are left arguing in circles, mirroring the monument itself. A riddle carved into the landscape of Britain, and just as Stonehenge baffles, so too does the Nazca lines of Peru, enormous geoglyphs etched into desert soil, visible only from the air, depicting animals, shapes, and lines stretching for miles. Historians debate their purpose. Were they ritual pathways, astronomical calendars, or messages to the gods. Some theories border on the fantastical, yet no consensus exists. And this is what makes them so haunting, because they defy simple explanation and challenge historians to think beyond conventional frameworks. And as we near the end of this portion of our story, we come to another debated figure, Cleopatra's tomb, the final resting place of Egypt's last pharaoh. Historians debate where she is buried. Some argue it lies near Alexandria. Others suggest Taposiris Magna. Excavations continue, but no discovery has been made. And without it, historians argue endlessly about what secrets her burial may hold, her politics, her alliances, her death. All shrouded in mystery until the day her tomb may be found, if it ever is, and so the debates carry on, feeding history with questions, never answers, and pulling us deeper into the realization that history is not a book with final chapters, but a suspense story that never ends. And as our journey into mysteries that historians still debate continues, we arrive at one of the most tantalizing questions in biblical history. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the caves of Qumran in the mid-20th century. These ancient manuscripts contain texts that predated much of the known Old Testament. Yet what historians argue about is who wrote them and why they were hidden. Were they the product of the Essenes, a Jewish sect living apart in the desert, or were they gathered from a broader Jewish community to be hidden during times of crisis? Some historians claim they represent the purest form of biblical texts. Others warn against drawing such conclusions, because the scrolls also contain sectarian writings and apocalyptic visions that complicate our picture of ancient religion, and so the debate persists, because every interpretation reshapes our understanding of one of history's most influential faiths, but the scrolls refuse to give definitive answers, and this lack of certainty drives scholars into endless argument, and as the Dead Sea Caves remind us of hidden texts, so too does another debated relic, the Gospel of Judas, a text discovered in the 1970s but only made public decades later, portraying Judas Iscariot not as a betrayer but as a chosen disciple carrying out Jesus' request. Historians argue bitterly about its meaning. Whether it represents an authentic alternative Christian tradition or is a heretical invention, whether it should reshape how we view early Christianity or be dismissed as fringe. And in these debates, history shows its fragility, because documents once buried can suddenly challenge 2,000 years of belief, and the academic world reels with disagreement, leaving laypeople stunned that historians themselves cannot decide. And if religion sparks debate, so too does science, and its forgotten figures, like the mysterious genius Nikola Tesla, whose inventions often seemed ahead of their time. Historians debate whether his work on wireless energy and free power was truly suppressed by powerful interests or simply too impractical for his age. The arguments rage between conspiracy and pragmatism, yet Tesla's name continues to hover in the shadows of history as a man whose potential was never fully realized, and this alone fuels endless speculation. And when historians are drawn into Tesla, they are pulled into the broader debate of technological suppression, asking how many other discoveries were lost, ignored, or silenced. And suddenly history looks less like progress and more like a maze, filled with dead ends, choices, and mysteries of invention. And speaking of inventions that historians fight to explain, we cannot ignore the Baghdad battery, clay jars with copper and iron components discovered in a rock that resembles simple galvanic cells. If they were batteries, what were they used for? Some historians argue they may have been for electroplating or ritual. Others dismiss the idea entirely as an anachronistic interpretation, yet the objects remain, forcing debate over whether ancient peoples had knowledge of electricity thousands of years before we thought. And here again the mystery deepens, because one discovery challenges entire timelines, and so historians argue fiercely, sometimes more against each other than against the evidence. And while we dwell in ancient artifacts, we must not forget the famous legend of El Dorado, the city of gold that drove conquistadors into the jungles of South America. Historians debate whether El Dorado ever existed or whether it was a misinterpretation of indigenous rituals, perhaps based on chiefs covered in gold dust during ceremonies. Some historians argue that El Dorado was not a place, but a myth born of European greed. Others insist that real golden cities or kingdoms existed and were destroyed or hidden. The debate endures because countless expeditions sought El Dorado, Many lives were lost in the search, and yet the legend never dies. It lingers, because history itself is fueled by what may have been, and just as El Dorado lures with golden promises, so too does the lost treasure of the Roman Empire. For when Rome collapsed, countless fortunes of coin, jewels, and artifacts vanished, some hidden deliberately, others looted, and historians still argue about where they went. Whether treasure hoards discovered in Europe are remnants of imperial wealth or unrelated stashes, and these arguments matter because they shape how we understand the fall of Rome. Was it chaotic scattering or careful concealment? The debates are alive and fierce, because treasure is never neutral. It is power, it is history, and its disappearance leaves a mystery that calls out to be solved. And if Rome's riches stir debate, then the Roman Emperor Nero stirs even more. Historians have long argued over his character. Was he truly the tyrant who fiddled while Rome burned, or has he been slandered by later writers with political agendas? Evidence exists on both sides, and scholars clash fiercely over whether Nero was monstrous or merely misunderstood. This debate matters because it shows how history itself can be written as propaganda, a reminder that historians are not simply uncovering truth, but navigating the distortions left behind by earlier ages. And this realization brings us to another debated disaster, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE and the fate of Pompeii and Herculaneum. While the destruction itself is not questioned, historians debate over details, such as the exact timeline of the eruption, the cause of certain mysterious deaths, and even whether Pliny the Younger's famous account is reliable. New discoveries force old assumptions to collapse, and historians argue again, showing that even events we thought we knew can change. When evidence refuses to remain static, and from volcanic ashes we leap into icy mysteries like the fate of the Franklin expedition, the doomed 19th century British mission to chart the Northwest Passage, ships trapped in ice, crews vanishing, relics discovered with strange clues of starvation, cannibalism, and desperation, historians argue about what truly killed the expedition. Was it lead poisoning from canned food, starvation, disease, or a combination? And what role did indigenous Inuit testimony play in understanding the disaster? For decades, historians dismissed oral accounts only to later find they held key details, and so the debate endures because the Franklin expedition sits at the crossroads of science, colonial arrogance, and tragedy. A puzzle of human endurance and human error. And speaking of vanishing expeditions, we cannot forget Amelia Earhart, the pioneering aviator whose disappearance in 1937 has haunted history ever since. Historians debate her fate. Whether she crashed into the ocean, was captured by the Japanese, or landed on a remote island and perished. Evidence has been put forth for each theory, but never conclusively, and the debates persist because Earhart represents not only a personal mystery, but a symbol of courage, risk, and the unknown. And every time historians think they are close, the evidence falters, leaving only speculation. And as aviation mysteries grip us, we also must consider maritime enigmas like the Mary Celeste. The ship discovered drifting in the Atlantic in 1872 with its crew vanished. Historians argue endlessly about what happened. Theories of mutiny, piracy, storms, alcohol fumes, or natural disaster are weighed and contested, but no theory satisfies everyone. The ship's mystery is too clean, too strange, and so the debate lives on. Historians trapped in endless cycles of explanation that never close the case, and it is here that you, the viewer, must see the pattern. History is not a straight story. It is a labyrinth, one filled with twists that leave even the brightest minds unsettled. And if you have stayed this far, still following the thread through mysteries of lost cities, strange artifacts, vanished explorers, then this is the moment I ask you again to stay with me until the very end, because the deeper we go, the stranger it becomes, like peeling back the layers of a forgotten book. And every chapter demands that you do more than just watch. It asks you to join the conversation, to like, to comment, to share, to subscribe, because what we are uncovering together is not just history, it is the drama of uncertainty itself. And you're part of it by keeping the journey alive. So hold fast, because the next mysteries will bend your imagination as much as they bend the historians who argue over them every day. As we press forward into the shadowy corridors of debated history, we must turn our attention to one of the most chilling and enduring enigmas, the identity of the man in the Iron Mask, a mysterious prisoner held during the reign of Louis XIV of France whose face was always hidden by a mask. Historians have argued for centuries about who he really was. Some say he was the king's brother. Others claim he was a disgraced noble or a political threat. Even Voltaire fanned the flames by suggesting scandalous theories. Yet to this day, no historian can point to a definitive identity. The debate rages in books, articles, and conferences, and the prisoner remains a haunting reminder of how power can bury truth, another mystery scholars cannot agree upon. And from the dark cells of France, we leap into the sands of Egypt again with another mystery, the construction of the Sphinx. Historians argue endlessly about its true age. Was it built during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BC? Mainstream scholars insist. Or is it far older, weathered by rain long before Egypt became desert? Some geologists claim the erosion patterns suggest extreme antiquity, perhaps predating known Egyptian civilization, and if that is true, it rewrites history itself. Other historians reject this fiercely, clinging to the conventional timeline, and so debates rage, with the Sphinx's silent gaze mocking both sides. A riddle in stone that refuses to yield its answer. And speaking of riddles carved into history, we must also examine the mystery of the Library of Alexandria, the greatest repository of knowledge in the ancient world, destroyed in fire and conflict. But historians cannot agree on when exactly it was destroyed, by whom, or how much was truly lost. Some say Julius Caesar's invasion began the ruin. Others claim later Christian or Muslim rulers finished it. Yet still others argue that the library was not one building but a collection of libraries, and that much of its destruction happened gradually. The debates are fierce because the stakes are high. If the library truly held works of science, philosophy, and exploration lost forever, then human history was robbed of knowledge that could have changed the world, and the thought of that loss keeps historians debating endlessly. And as the ashes of Alexandria remind us of lost texts, we must confront another debated legend. The Holy Grail. Was it a chalice, a bloodline, or simply a metaphor for divine grace? Historians argue over its origins. Some say it was medieval invention woven into the Arthurian romances. Others insist it may trace back to earlier Christian relic traditions, while alternative theorists claim it was real, hidden, and passed down through secret societies. Mainstream historians scoff, but cannot fully explain the persistence of the legend, and so it lives on, debated in books and halls of academia alike. A symbol of how history and myth blur, until even experts cannot cleanly divide them. And from chalices we move to ships. For the debate over the disappearance of the Spanish Armada in 1588 is not about whether it was defeated, but about how much nature versus strategy determined the outcome. Some historians argue the English fleet was decisive. Others insist storms destroyed the Armada. Others still claim the Spanish logistical failures were more to blame than enemy action. The debates matter because they shape how we understand the rise of English naval power, and yet historians still argue over exactly what turned the tide, proving that even great military events are not immune to debate. And speaking of maritime mysteries, we must remember the disappearance of the Portuguese explorer Miguel Cortereal. Lost in North America in 1502, historians argue about his fate, whether he perished, was captured, or even assimilated into local communities. The lack of records leaves space for speculation and endless disagreement. Another explorer swallowed by time, another chapter of history historians cannot close, and as explorers vanish, so too do entire civilizations, like the Indus Valley Civilization, one of the world's earliest urban cultures, boasting advanced cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, with sewage systems and planned streets. Yet historians debate endlessly why it collapsed. Some point to climate change and drought, others to shifting rivers, others to invasion. The truth remains obscured because the Indus script is still undeciphered, leaving the voices of this vast civilization silent. And historians argue not just about its fall, but about its very nature. Was it peaceful? Was it hierarchical? How did it govern itself? So many questions with no agreed answers. And here again history reminds us of its mysteries, and as if to echo the silence of undeciphered scripts, we return to the baffling Phaistos disc, discovered on Crete, covered in symbols spiraling around both sides, a script that no one has definitively deciphered. Some historians call it a unique writing system. Others claim it was ceremonial or even a forgery planted by early excavators. Debates continue, and each new theory collapses under scrutiny, leaving the disc as one of the most mysterious artifacts of archaeology. And the Phaistos disc is not alone, for across the globe other undeciphered scripts torment historians, like Rongorongo from Easter Island, Linear A from Minoan Crete, or the mysterious carvings of the Cascadal block from the Olmec civilization. Each one sparking debates that rage without resolution, and in each case historians are divided between cautious conservatism and daring speculation, and as these arguments rage the public watches, fascinated, because the debates themselves reveal how much we still do not know. And now let's leap into another kind of debate, not about scripts but about people. Christopher Columbus, long celebrated as the discoverer of the New World but increasingly debated by historians as both hero and villain. Was he a visionary navigator or a brutal colonizer? The debate is not just academic but cultural, shaping monuments, holidays, and public memory. Historians argue passionately because the stakes are not only in the past but in the present, and this is the truth. History's mysteries are not always about lost relics. Sometimes they are about the meaning of lives and legacies. And from Columbus, we pivot to another figure, Joan of Arc, the peasant girl who led French armies under divine visions. Captured and executed as a heretic, later canonized as a saint, historians debate whether her visions were genuine mystical experiences, religious fervor, or symptoms of medical conditions. Some argue she was manipulated by political forces. Others insist she was fully in command of her destiny. The debates make her more mysterious, not less, because every interpretation reveals a different Joan, and historians cannot agree on which is true. And as individuals stir debate, so too do entire continents. For the settlement of the Americas itself is debated. Did humans cross a land bridge from Siberia 13,000 years ago? Or were they here much earlier? Evidence of pre-Clovis sites suggests humans arrived sooner, maybe by boat along the coastlines. Historians argue furiously over these dates because they rewrite not just American history but the story of humanity itself. The debates grow fiercer with every new discovery because the past refuses to fit neatly into old models. And just when you think you have grasped the debates, another shock emerges, like the mystery of the Hope Diamond and its supposed curse. Was it truly cursed, or is that superstition layered onto a gem with a bloody colonial history? Historians debate whether the stories of misfortune were exaggerated to enhance its mystique, yet its journey from India through kings and collectors is filled with enough strange coincidences to keep the debate alive. And once again, history proves itself stranger than fiction. And as we close this portion of our exploration, I urge you, viewer, do not step away now, because the mysteries ahead are even more gripping, the debates even more heated, and each story more unsettling than the last. And I remind you to like this video, comment on which mystery has shaken you the most, share this with a friend who needs to see how unstable our knowledge of the past truly is, and subscribe. Because in the final set of mysteries, we will confront questions so powerful that even the greatest historians cannot look at them without trembling, for the end of this journey is the realization that history is not a set of facts but a battlefield of contested truths, and you and I are witnesses to the struggle. The last stretch of our journey into 46 minutes of mysteries that actual historians debate is perhaps the most crucial because we're now peeling back the final layers of the enigmas that have refused to give way to reason, science, and documentation for centuries, and the deeper we go, the more haunting and compelling these unsolved riddles become. And if you've made it this far, then you are already among those who hunger for truth and crave the thrill of the unknown, so stay with me until the end. Because this final act of our exploration may very well leave you questioning not only history but reality itself. We begin with the mystery of the Baghdad Battery, a strange clay jar discovered in Iraq in the 1930s with copper and iron components inside. When researchers reconstructed the design, they found that with vinegar or citrus juice as an electrolyte, the jar could generate a small electric current, essentially a Primitive battery, but how could such knowledge exist thousands of years before? Electricity was supposedly harnessed. Historians argue over whether it was really a battery at all. Some claim it was simply a storage vessel for scrolls or sacred objects. Others insist it might have been used in ancient electroplating experiments. If true, this would mean electricity was discovered and applied long before Benjamin Franklin's kite experiment. Yet why is there no other record of widespread electrical use? In the ancient world, the Baghdad battery teeters between being a mundane jar and a window into a forgotten technological revolution. Now, from electricity we drift to sound, because another debated mystery is the origins of Stonehenge. The monument is endlessly mysterious, not only in how its megaliths were transported, but in why they were arranged in such precise circles. Archaeologists propose religious rituals or astronomical alignments, but recent acoustic experiments show that the stones reflect and amplify sound, creating almost a natural amphitheater. Was Stonehenge less a calendar and more a massive sound machine designed for chants, music, and perhaps even communication with something greater? Historians argue fiercely because each explanation opens up more questions. If it was about sound, why such effort? If it was about astronomy, why so much emphasis on resonance? Perhaps the true answer combines both, but the fact remains we don't know, and that's why Stonehenge remains not just a tourist site, but an eternal riddle. As we turn away from the rolling plains of England, we dive under the sea into the legend of Yonaguni. Off the coast of Japan, divers discovered massive stone formations that resemble staircases, pillars, and platforms. Some researchers insist they're natural rock formations sculpted by time. Others argue they're remnants of a lost civilization submerged thousands of years ago. If they are man-made, then the timeline of human history in Asia is wrong. If they're natural, then why do they look so deliberately carved? Japanese scholars and international archaeologists still fight over the interpretations, but no consensus has been reached, and the waters of Yonaguni still guard their secret. Rising out of the water, we shift to the burning deserts of Peru, where the mysterious Nazca lines stretch for miles, etched into the earth, forming massive figures of animals, plants, and geometric shapes visible only from above. The people who created them lived centuries before flight. So why design something they could never see in full? Was it for the gods in the sky? Was it a massive astronomical map? Was it simply ceremonial art? Even with decades of study, historians cannot agree, and to this day the Nazca Desert whispers its unanswered questions. And now I want you to pause, take a deep breath, because if you thought these mysteries were staggering, the final set will shake the very foundation of what you believe about human civilization. We move to Turkey, and the ancient site of Göbekli Tepe, often called the world's first temple, dated to around 9,600 BCE. It is far older than Stonehenge or the pyramids, and yet it's stone. Pillars are adorned with intricate carvings of animals and symbols. The problem is mainstream history tells us that during this period humans were simple hunter-gatherers, not capable of building such sophisticated monuments. So, how did Göbekli Tepe come to exist? Was there a forgotten advanced culture? Did humans organize religion and architecture far earlier than previously thought? And why was the site intentionally buried in antiquity? Scholars are split. Some argue it rewrites history entirely, others caution against leaping to conclusions, but even the cautious cannot deny it stands as one of the greatest historical puzzles ever unearthed. From Göbekli Tepe we jump forward in time to the Great Library of Alexandria, once the storehouse of all human knowledge. It was said to contain scrolls from across the known world, perhaps even knowledge of lost civilizations. But its destruction, whether by fire, invasion, or political order, remains one of history's darkest enigmas. Some historians debate if it was truly destroyed in a single event or gradually faded away through negligence. What's certain is that humanity lost priceless records of science, medicine, and history, and the mystery of what was contained in those scrolls haunts scholars to this day. Was it simply the myths and stories of its time, or could it have held technological blueprints, maps of unknown lands, or secrets we still struggle with today? Imagine for a moment, if the knowledge of the library survived, how different would our world look? And now, as we inch toward the final minutes of our journey, I want to bring you to one of the most perplexing tales of identity and deception, the story of the man in the Iron Mask. In 17th century France, a prisoner was kept under strict secrecy, forced to wear a mask that concealed his identity. Historians have argued endlessly about who he really was. Some say he was the twin brother of King Louis XIV. Others argue he was a disgraced noble or a political prisoner. What's chilling is that no record has ever been clear. His true name remains erased, and centuries later his face and story remain locked behind iron secrecy. Just like the mask he wore, now we close with the greatest unsolved mystery of all, the origin of human consciousness itself. Historians, scientists, and philosophers debate not just when but how humans became self-aware. We can trace bones, tools, and art, but when did the spark of thought ignite? When did humanity cross the threshold from animal to dreamer, creator, and destroyer? Alike, some argue it was gradual, others say it was sudden, some whisper it came from divine inspiration, others point to evolutionary necessity. But the truth is we don't know, and perhaps we never will, and that is the final and ultimate mystery that all historians quietly debate, because it touches the soul of who we are. As we conclude these 46 minutes of mysteries, I want you to remember something: what makes history so thrilling isn't just what we know, it's what we don't know, the gaps, the shadows, the questions that refuse to be silenced. So if you've stayed until now, you've walked with me through the greatest enigmas of our past, and I thank you. But our journey doesn't end here. In fact, it's only beginning, because each mystery invites you to look deeper, to read more, to think harder, and to never accept the first explanation as the final truth. So if you love these hidden stories, if you crave the unknown, then do me one favor right now: hit that like button, share this video with friends, drop a comment about which mystery stunned you the most, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel, because together we will keep pulling at the threads of history and unraveling the secrets the world doesn't want us to see. This has been Minutes of Mysteries that actual historians debate, but the mysteries don't stop here, not by a long shot. More are waiting, more are calling, and the only question left is, will you join me in uncovering them?